Okay, so very good evening to all of you. I can see few of you have logged in, and I can see Anubhati's query. She has written how to prepare for economics. See, I told you prior also that for economics, what you need, there are three parameters. One is that the concepts you should be very thorough with, okay, and you should be able to link it with the current scenario. And third is that it is not core based on numericals or in terms of mathematical application. It's equally important to understand the inferences to be drawn. Okay, so that is how. And once you understand the concept, then everything will be easy for you to frame your answers. And you can score very good marks if you can clear with the concept. So concept clarity is very, very important. And number two, application is very, very important to understand. So once you understand the concept, then you can connect all the parameters with respect to whether we say multiplier, whether you say national income accounting, or you say about theoretical questions. So you can frame with examples, and then you will be able to filter that what is most important. And for any paper or any answer, what is important is that remember theory. Shivam, to remember theory, you cannot remember theory. It's about concepts. Once you develop the concept, then in that case, you can easily recap. So it's not something about cramming. You can't go for rot learning here. It's simply about to understand the concept, and then you can frame your answers. And do take care about that you should always write pointers. So if you write pointers, or there are certain weightage words which have to be given more importance when you frame your answer. So you may write a lengthy answer, but you are missing all important words which have high weightage, you will lose marks. So in economics, it's not about length of the answer. It's important about the terminology which you are using. Okay. So when the question is related to, let's say about national income accounting, then in that case, you should be very thorough about what is gross, what is net, what is depreciation, what is expenditure method. When you're talking Keynesian theory, then you have to know about what is aggregate demand, what is aggregate supply, what are the components of aggregate demand and supply, how it makes difference in terms of equilibrium, how the tax makes impact, how government expenditure makes impact on the economy, what is the concept of full employment, underemployment, what is inflationary gap, what is deflationary gap. So once you understand the concept with the graphs, sometimes it is important to draw graphs, and sometimes you can just write in terms of words. We will be sharing, we will be devoting one class to share all the questions in the end of the class, okay? Not today, maybe after next class. So don't worry on that account. Okay, so today we are going to share, see, we started from national income accounting. We switched over to the concept of public finance. We took care about market failure. We also shared about where the government need to intervene. And I believe there was some query which was posted by one of you that was related to merit good. In the case of merit good, why the government should go for intervening. So I'm sharing very brief about it before we go ahead. So you understand merit good is about wearing a helmet as given in your study material also. So wearing a helmet is merit good, isn't it? If you are wearing a helmet while driving, what are you doing? You are safeguarding yourself, and you are taking care about others, those who are directly attached to you, or other people, those who are driving close to you. Isn't it? So that is merit good. But how many of us actually we practice religiously to wear a helmet? We follow this when we see traffic police wala is there, and then people start wearing. I've seen many youngsters riding on the bike and scooter and whatever it is, about 3 people, and they go at such a speed just to escape from the eyes of traffic police wala, without realizing that they are not making fool the police wala, they are making fool out of themselves. So merit good is something which is very important for people, for the well-being of the people, but people don't realize its importance. And private players are not ready to go for that. Why should private player go for that? So private player, for example, we shared about education. But since government has made it mandatory to go for helmet, that is why private players are there, so they can go for catering. And some people realize that sometimes they believe it is trendy, so they wear good kind of helmet just to show it off to others. And that is why private players are there, because they get that kind of a price. But when we talk about merit goods, like education for a girl child, education for marginalized set of people, education for people in rural India, it is a merit good. But do you think that in a family of 5 or 6, if there are 3 daughters, 1 son, then in that case, and the fellow is a farmer, will voluntarily send a child to for higher education or to school? Maybe 1 or 2 in a remote case you will find. Otherwise, people are very reluctant to send. So in that case, government has to go for offering them free education, not only free education, along with that meal also. So if you give them food, then in that case, parents feel like my child is getting food also. Let the child go for education because they are getting food. So food is an incentive. So sometimes merit goods you need to promote where you have to offer them free. And it is important where to offer free, where you feel like that it is basic necessity and people will be. So for example, COVID vaccine, it's a merit good. And all frontline workers and others were offered free. Why they were offered, even other set of people were offered free. Why was it offered free? Because it's matter of life and death for not only for them, but for other people also. And people were hesitant to pay for it. People didn't realize the importance of it. But on the other side, mask, you see mask, people have to, mask is merit good in the current scenario because of COVID and the protocol which we see. But many people do not want to wear mask. So government, then traffic police wala and others started putting challan, giving challans, isn't it? Imposing challan and fines. It went up to 2,000 rupees also. And when they said that we will be penalizing you, then people started wearing it. So sometimes merit good is very good, but people are not willing to go for it, and private players are not ready to go for it, because who is going to take care about those set of people? See, private players are always driven by demand. And merit good is something which is not inbuilt demand. You have to create demand for that. Despite knowing that it is for your well-being, people are not bothered about. So that's why government need to intervene, sensitizing people, providing them, making them accustomed to it. Once they become accustomed to it, then they go for using it. Okay? So that's the concept. I don't know which child had asked for this question, but I received this query. So I hope it is clear to all of you. Merit good, why government need to intervene, and why sometimes government has to offer these free. In case of Delhi offering free water, free electricity, sometimes it is more of political also. And because of that, you are absolutely right. It leads to free rider problem. People go for misusing it when the price is not matching up with the utility you get through that. So that's also a big question mark. So that you have to draw. Absolutely. Mancha, yoga is, Government of India is promoting yoga like anything. It's a merit good. People don't realize. So Modi himself, the Prime Minister of our country, he himself practiced it. And there are many. So yoga was always there. But now people have started practicing it. They are realizing, because government is sensitizing, no? Government is sensitizing for Ayurveda products. Government is sensitizing for mental well-being. So these are merit goods. So government intervention is very important. Otherwise, now once the government has intervened, now private players are pitching in. Because they find that certain set of people, they find it profitable for them, they will go. But will they go for poor people that you learn yoga? They'll not go for them. Why should they go for them? Because they will not get money. Government will say that we are organizing free camp, you learn. Isn't it? So merit goods sometimes need to be offered free for the well-being of country, for the well-being of people, for the larger set of people, those who do not realize its importance, but it is of huge and very high value for all in the society. Polio drops merit good, isn't it? So that you have to see. Yeah, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'll upload. I'm uploading all these. Are you not receiving? So anyways, without wasting further time, we are sharing today fiscal policy. Okay. So fiscal policy, you remember we shared about public finance given by whom? Musgrave, father of public finance. We shared about that how government take care about micro factors. What are the micro factors? Resource allocation, efficient resource allocation. When you find there are certain players who are having who wants to capture the market, then the government intervenes. So that leads to market failure. So we have shared about market failure. We have shared about public good. We have shared about where the government has to go for public good, where you feel it can't be excluded. Okay, so where government feel that the rivals can create a problem, so then government goes for creating that. We have shared club goods, we have shared merit goods, we have shared demerit goods, we have shared quasi public goods. Okay, so we have already shared. We have shared lemons problem, we have shared common access problem. Now we are talking today about fiscal policy, that is macro. So we have shared micro and government intervention. Today we are sharing macro economic stabilization. So if you people, apart from your study material, if you follow country like Sri Lanka, if you follow what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, so you might understand this and you may have some idea about. Okay, so you understand that Sri Lanka, what is exact problem in Sri Lanka? Any idea about? What went wrong in Sri Lanka? If you are reading, anybody is following Sri Lanka? Apart from your study material, do you get time to read about what's happening in the world? You should read. You should read because that will help you in economics. Okay, so Sri Lanka, if you know about Sri Lanka is passing through a very tough time. People over there are deprived of basic food. And Sri Lanka, you know, is a country which is famous for its beaches. Beach are there. And secondly, it is famous for textile. They have a textile base over there. But the country is in deep debt. Debt, aap samajhte hain? Loans. They have taken loan last 10 years to go for funding. So government has taken loan, and through that loan, government has gone for taking care about investing in the country. But that investment was core confined to tourism and textile. They didn't go for using self-sufficiency in terms of production of food products, production of developing skill the way India is doing. So what happened because of that? They took loan over the period of time. That loan money was used for what we call bond, you call raising through these things. So government raised money. That money was used for what? For specific activities. And these activities were confined to tourism and some basic sectors. And then the problem arose of oil, and that created problem. So they could not sustain, and that led to high inflation in Sri Lanka and countries in huge debt. That is what fiscal policy is about. Fiscal policy is the government policy which takes care about taxes, when to offer taxes, when to increase taxes, when to reduce taxes. Just like COVID mein dekha, COVID government had given relaxation in terms of taxes. Government over the years has reduced corporate tax. Government has introduced GST. Government has simplified income tax norms, slabs. Government goes for subsidy also channelized through connecting with Aadhaar cards. Government is promoting subsidized education. Government is promoting subsidized health services. So this is what is fiscal policy. So fiscal policy is what? Fiscal policy is government expenditure where the government has to spend. How the government is going to spend? Government may spend on revenue expenditure, government may spend on capital expenditure. What do you mean by revenue expenditure? Government has to go for spending on expenses which are not generating return. For example, salary of government employees. For example, administrative expenses. For example, any kind of political leaders getting security and others, safety and others. Government spending on something like promotion, government spending on interest payments are all revenue expenses. What are government capital expenses? Government may spend on skill. India, government may spend on education. Government may spend on flyovers. Government may spend on R&D, research and development. Government may spend on farm agriculture, productivity. Government may spend on uh, like new education policy, health policy. So these are all expenses of the government, capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. Then government goes for revenue. From where the government gets revenue? Government gets revenue from taxes. Taxes, you have income tax, you have corporate tax, isn't it? You have excise duties. So these are the tax proceeds government gets revenue. What are the non-tax government get revenue through non-tax? What are the non-tax receipts of the government? So, government has gone for selling its Air India unit. So the money has come to the government. Government goes for 2G spectrum, 3G spectrum, 4G spectrum. Government gets money through that. That's why you see Geo is there, other players are there. So government gets money through that. Then government has Steel Authority of India Limited. Government has ONGC, Oil and Natural Gas Commission. Government has MTNL. Government has BSNL. Government has public sector banks. So government gets income through these. So that is also revenue for the government. Okay. So what is fiscal policy? It takes care about expenses. It takes care about revenue. It takes care about debt. If government expenses exceeds its revenue, then government has to borrow. So government borrowings is also part of fiscal policy. Okay. So government investments is also part of fiscal policy. That's a capital expenditure. So that is what we are going to share today. So you understand the role of fiscal policy. What is deficit financing? Deficit financing here is that government expenses exceed its receipts. So that means the government is in deficit because their expenses are more than its receipts. So government has to meet that gap by financing. Either they finance it through borrowings or they go for printing currency notes. If they borrow from through bonds, if they borrow from savings of people, then in that case, we'll share. Okay. I hope you have moved quite ahead of it where we are today. We have started with. Okay. So let's go ahead. I was just creating momentum for this, that you should be in sync with what we are talking about, fiscal policy. Okay. So our journey from national income accounting, today we are talking about fiscal policy. I hope you have enjoyed it all throughout. Today we are going to talk about, we switched over from government intervention. So we took care about government intervention. If you see from government intervention, we have moved to, today we are going to talk about taxes and subsidies. So today we are talking about taxes and subsidies and private consumption. Okay. So this is important. Taxes and subsidies go for taking care about consumption and subsidies, consumption and investments. You remember we had shared Ukraine crisis हम बाद में discuss करेंगे. अभी we cannot go for discussing it, but majorly you understand it's a fight between Russia's ideologies and Ukraine's preference with respect to NATO. That's a different story. Abhi we cannot talk about that because अगर वो बात करने लग जाएंगे हम, तो we will be lacking behind in terms of your syllabus. So let's go for taking care about this today. अगर time बचेगा बेटा, then we'll discuss it or we'll discuss it later. Okay, don't worry on this account. So अगर आप पढ़ रहे हो Ukraine Russia crisis, good for you, good for us. But if you're not reading, you should start following it. We'll share it. Okay. Anyways, we are talking today about fiscal policy. I've already told you about the concept of fiscal policy. So we are going to take it forward from here. I want to use it. Okay. Okay. So you see, what is the impact of taxes and subsidies? What's the impact of taxes and subsidies? If you see taxes, what's the impact of taxes? And we have done YD, you remember? Disposable income. Disposable income is Y minus taxes and plus transfer receipts, you remember? So what is taxes? Who takes care about taxes and transfer receipts? What is transfer receipts? Transfer receipts are government. Government gives you subsidies, government give you allowances. So that is government expenses. This is government expense, isn't it? This is government expense, transfer receipts, and taxes is government's revenue. So what happens if the government goes for increasing tax rate? Government revenue increases. But what happens to your disposable income? Your disposable income goes down. If government offers subsidies, government offering subsidies, what happens to government expenses? Government expenses goes up. What happens to your disposable income? Your disposable income goes up. Your disposable income goes up. And what do you do with disposable income? With your disposable income, either you go for consumption or you go for saving. If your disposable income increases, you'll consume. And this consumption depends on what? This consumption depends on MPC. Remember? What is MPC? Change in consumption to change in income. So that is what is private consumption. And you remember we had shared that aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus X, plus G plus X minus M, isn't it? So if taxes increases, consumption demand will decrease. What happens to investment demand if the tax rate increases? If you are consuming less, are the corporate going to produce? They'll produce less because they are producing, because you're demanding. So investment demand reduces. What happens because of that? Government tax proceeds will reduce. Tax proceed reduces means government expenses will increase. Government expenses increases means one of you were talking about with respect to one of you were talking about deficit financing. So government expenses exceeds, receipts decreases, leads to what? Gap between the two, that leads to deficit. Government goes for deficit means then government has to borrow to meet the gap. Isn't it? So that's the concept. Taxes, subsidies. So taxes reduces, creates disincentive for consumption, and subsidies create incentive for consumption. This is clear? Then what are the components of fiscal policy? So we have already shared what are the components of fiscal policy. What is this aggregate income? Aggregate income is, we have shared Y, or I should say, at equilibrium we have done, you remember, at equilibrium we have done, at equilibrium, aggregate supply is equal to aggregate demand, and Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Isn't it? So this is what? This is aggregate income. So fiscal policy components are aggregate income, aggregate expenditure. This is aggregate expenditure. So aggregate expenditure is the demand front, and this is from the supply front. Basically, fiscal policy takes care from the demand perspective. How? If tax goes up, consumption goes down. If subsidies are given, then in that case, consumption increases. If subsidies can be given to corporate also, okay, so then in that case, investment will increase, government expenditure increases. And if your country is able to produce at low cost, better government spending on Skill India, investments will increase because your productivity goes up, your exports will increase. So this fiscal policy takes care on the right-hand side. Okay, so aggregate expenditure, government debt, and deficit. So what is fiscal policy components are? What are the components of fiscal policy? Aggregate income on the right side, because if this is taken care, obviously this is going to be impacted. So aggregate income, aggregate expenditure, these are all components of aggregate expenditure. Government debt. Why government debt? If these two, if aggregate demand, if government expenses exceeds, then it's receipts. जो आप देखिए श्रीलंका में हुआ, if government expenses exceeds its receipts, then in that case government has to borrow. So it will borrow, and if government borrowings increases, then in that case, it will lead to debt. That is debt. And to meet that debt, you have to go for deficit. You have to go for borrowings more and more. So what is its impact on employment in the country, economic growth of the country, how it leads to price level change in the country, how it impacts total output in the country. So that's all fiscal policy is all about. Okay. Yes, Mansha, transfer payments are not part of country's GDP, but you remember this is a part of disposable income, isn't it? So since it is a part of disposable income, it definitely makes impact, isn't it? Because disposable income affects your consumption demand affects investment demand. Okay, so fiscal policy involves the use of government spending. We have already shared taxes and subsidies and borrowings to influence both the pattern of economic activity. So it takes care about here both the patterns of economic activity, that is growth, demand, output, and employment. Okay, as we'll proceed, you will be able to connect better. So what is significance wise? We have shared Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. We have shared the difference between classical and Keynesian concept. Why John Maynard Keynes is considered as father of macroeconomics? Because he brought this concept that government role is very, very important when things are not moving in the correct manner. So Great Depression 1930, I hope aapne sabne padha hai. Financial crisis 2008, you are aware about. Lehman Brothers collapsed. And there was a huge crisis in all over the world. Because of this, America, US economy suffered, UK economy suffered, all over the world, countries suffered because of this financial crisis. And you see pandemic. All these scenarios, if you see 1930s, you see when Lehman Brothers collapsed, who took care about bringing it back on track? Government only. Government had gone for bailout package. So government brought it back on this track, US economy. Great Depression, government took care and brought the economy back on track. Pandemic, private players were not investing. They were hesitant to invest. Who invested in the market? Who had gone for extensively way spending on health and other things? Definitely government. So government intervenes, government goes for taking measures, which is the core component of bringing economy back on track. Okay? Definitely. 1991 के reforms bit are different थे. We were having problem, and we thank God we could overcome that because we were running short of import bill to pay. But Sri Lanka ka problem is very chronic. Okay, anyways, so when we talk about here significance of fiscal, padhiye, you will really come to know, you will be able to connect with so many concepts agar aap Sri Lanka padhenge to. What went wrong in Sri Lanka? So it's a debt crisis basically. And why it led to debt? You read about it and you will find it, you will be able to connect with this concept here. Okay. So what happened during these crises, whether you say about Great Depression of 1930s, when aggregate demand was very low. Here also financial crisis, aggregate demand was very low. Pandemic also, people were apprehensive about not spending. Aggregate demand was low. So in these scenario, government has to take the charge. Government will go for subsidies. Government will go for spending money. We have shared government multiplier, expenditure multiplier. So government has to take care about economic growth, bring economy back on track. Government has to take care about equitable distribution of income. How do they do it? They go for imposing wealth tax, property tax. They go for giving benefits to lower income strata. They take care about reduction of poverty by giving them subsidies, giving them allowances, giving them benefits in terms of so many parameters. So we have already shared in prior classes. So they also has to take care about price stability. If inflation is high, then we have shared inflationary gap and deflationary gap. So government has to intervene. exchange rate stability. If inflation is high in a country, what happens because of that? If price level goes up, आप देख रहे हैं पेट्रोल का प्राइसेस कैसे अप एंड अप जा रहा है. So if inflation goes up, what's going to happen because of that? If petrol prices are up, all your logistic cost goes up. Logistic cost goes up means a truck carrying product from A to B place, its cost will go up. Its cost goes up means, do you think the producer is going to bear the cost? They'll pass it on to the consumers. Consumers' disposable income will reduce because they have to spend more and more. They will be not able to purchase more goods. Inflation, if inflation goes up, interest rates will be higher. Interest rate is higher means investments will decrease. So you see, all front inflation has negative impact. And if cost of production in India goes up, what happens to exports? Exports will reduce because your cost of production goes up. After all, आप produce कहाँ कर रहे हैं? Within India. So since you are producing in India, and if the production cost goes up, then in that case, your good in international market will be less competitive. You will not be able to sell in the international market at the price at which you are quoting, and the other players will be selling at a low price. So आपके export proceeds कम हो जाएंगे. You will be getting less exports from the international market. But oil तो आपको import करना ही करना है. So since you are importing oil, you have to pay dollar. So dollar gone. And here your exports have gone down. So here also you are not getting USD. So USD you are not getting here, and here you are losing. What happens? Your rupee becomes weak. इसीलिए आप देखिए $1 equal to 76 चला गया. That's the exchange rate. And if Indian rupee becomes weaker or dollar becomes more expensive, आपके import bill बढ़ते जाएंगे. Then in that case, government has to borrow more. And this will lead to deficit and debt. Okay, so that's a problem. So government has to take the charge in adverse circumstances. Lemon price नहीं आएगा बेटा इसमें, lemon price नहीं आएगा. Okay, so lemon is all in bad. Okay, so they have to take care about balance. So that's why you see they have to go for giving rebates to certain areas. जैसे अभी झारखंड डेवलप हो रहा है, अभी झारखंड में प्रॉब्लम है, so they are giving them subsidized food so that people should not suffer. So this is what all government has to do. But they bring amendments during. But the problem here is that budgets is decided once in a year. That's a problem. They have to make the budget once in a year. And if something goes wrong in between, then there are certain factors which have to be accommodated. So that's a problem, you see. So when we talk here about advantage and objectives of fiscal policy are same or different? No. Hirul. Objectives are to take care about balancing the economy and take care about macroeconomic stabilization, distribution. Advantages can be in terms of benefits, which trickles down. So recession is there, then it takes care about bringing back, generating employment, promoting skill India, startup India, through which people gain are advantages, okay? So policy measures resulting in benefits to the economy are advantages. Okay, so what are the tools government can use for economic growth, for taking care about aggregate demand, having increase in output and generating employment in the country and reduce unemployment in the country? So government can take care of this through public revenue government gets through income tax. Income tax slab may government can go for changing. Income tax rate government can go for changing in budget. So if government want that people should go for having more disposable income in a middle income group category, so income tax rate will be low, less. If government feels like that upper income strata people are having more income and they can spare some, they'll impose higher taxes on them. They can fix up corporate, they go for corporate tax, and they can go for cess also. Tax on tax. Isn't it? So this is the source of income for the government. Expenditure, government can go for revenue expenditure. Capital आपको बता दिया. Capital is on infrastructure, flyovers, road, research and development, education, health, housing for marginalized set of people, all about highways. So that's about capital expenditure. Revenue expenditure is expenditure on salaries, administrative expenses, then interest payments. Government employs what they go for spending on different activities, and others marketing, and others what they do, all are revenue expenses. Public debt can be short term. How government raise short term? Short term government can raise through like short term money market instruments, through treasury bills and others they can raise. Long term they raise it through bonds. Bonds can be for 10 years, 7 years. And they have to go for deficit financing. Deficit financing is that the gap is there. We cannot meet it through internal. Government can go for internal borrowings. Internal borrowings means India mein le liya. Or they have to borrow from international also. So sometimes they have to buy from IMF. Like one of you were talking about 91. So just abhi Sri Lanka ko bhi IMF se lena pad raha hai loan. So when you cannot meet, then you have to take loan from IMF, World Bank. World Bank is on different platform. You can raise it from international markets also. International market में भी आप bonds issue कर सकते हैं. You can go for printing of currency also, new currency. But it's not a good strategy. Print new currency and then meet your expenses. What is going to happen if you print new currency? Value of your currency will reduce, will depreciate. If it depreciates, that means inflation बढ़ जाएगा. So this is not a good strategy. Okay. So we have shared that fiscal policy is a demand side policy. Why we are saying that it is a demand side policy? Because we have shared, and you know this very well, that Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. This is demand side. This is supply side. I'm sorry. This is supply. I hope आप समझ जाएंगे. I'll write it again. So this is supply side, and this is all demand driven. Okay, so demand driven is basically fiscal policy takes care about demand. Okay, so I hope it is clear. So demand side, why do we say it is demand side? Because it is designed to take care about price level, change in the price level. It takes care about what time the government should go for, what should be the composition of government expenditure. So when in the current year, government has increased capital expenditure. In the current budget, if you see, they've increased capital expenditure. Why did they increase capital expenditure? Why government increase capital expenditure? Because if government goes for spending on capital investments and capital expenditure, then it will lead to multiplier. And this multiplier will generate income and output and employment. So this is what government can decide when to go for more capital expenditure, when to offer subsidies. Should we increase subsidies on fertilizers? Should we reduce subsidies? So this is about government taking care about. Then to how to change the fiscal burden. Fiscal burden means government is having debt in its book. So government says that rather be the government bearing it, then in that case they say, okay, let's go for selling. Just have flyovers. They go for giving it to private players. So they say that government gives to private players, you construct the flyover, and for the time being, then they have a concept of built, operate, and transfer. So given to the private player, you built it. You overcome your cost through toll and others. Once you get your cost, then this will go back to the government. So what is happening here? You understand then when government has to construct flyovers and roads, huge investments and time is there. So You go for investment today, you get returns later, and your money gets blocked. So government has given it to, it's given to the private players. You construct flyovers, built. You take care about, you go for taking care about that till the time you get your money. How do they get? Through toll. So toll tax के through उनको पैसा मिल गया अपना जितना उन्होंने investments किया था. Then it goes back to the government. And what's the gain here? So this is transfer of the fiscal burden from the government to the private players. Okay. Who regulates these organizations? IMF and World Bank. These are bodies which are a group of countries together working. They go for appointing one particular IMF chief and it's group of country. It is not one player here. So there are countries involved we are also member. We are member of WTO. We are member of. So it helps. And World Bank is different. World Bank takes care about. जैसे COVID में आप देखिए, problem of food was there, water was there. So World Bank ने बहुत funding किया है to Africa, to many countries they have funded. World Bank is for taking care about development in others. IMF is to overcome from any kind of crisis. जैसे अभी श्रीलंका का crisis है, जैसे 91 में हमारा crisis था. So in these conditions, IMF helps in terms of monetary help. Okay, so fiscal burden आपको समझ में आ गया to transfer it from. Yes, definitely, Mansha, you have to take care about 4-sector model because कोई भी economy में 4-sector model के बिना आप कैसे sustain कर सकते हो, isn't it? So what are the objectives of fiscal policy? Objectives are to maintain full employment. You have to maintain employment in the country. Achieve. Maintain नहीं कर सकते तो at least achieve करने की तो कोशिश कीजिए. Maintain price stability. Prices should be stable. You should promote economic growth in the short term and economic development in the long term. So countries should progress sustainably over the long period of time. Fiscal policy should take care about distribution, equitable distribution of income that should be equally distributed. The gap, you see, there's huge disparity. 99% of the country's income is in 1% of the people's hand. Custody. Understand? Baki sari 99% people are sharing 1% of the income. So what's happening? There's huge disparity between rich and poor. Rich people becoming further rich and poor becoming poor and poor. So government has to take care about that through fiscal policy measures. इसीलिए government reservations देती है, subsidies देती है, allowances देती है to take care about those sort of people which are deprived of. So government of India said that we'll offer you a house. So marginal people are getting house today. Government of India has offered crop insurance. So if you have some problem in terms of crop, we'll take care about that. So this is how government takes care about. That is all about fiscal policy objectives. Okay. So objectives of fiscal policy varies from country to country, and from time to time. जैसे कोविड में देखिए आप, कोविड में all across the world, first and the foremost priority was health. All countries had gone for were in deficit. Their expenses exceeded their income because their priority was to spend on health. So it varies from time to time. Sometimes important is that if you are passing through COVID, stability is more important. When you are in a good growth rate condition, then in that case, आपके लिए important है equality हो. You can promote equality. So to decide about that, countries which are developed, for them, it is important that they should take care about stability and equality. When we talk about developing countries, what is important in India? Youngsters are more. 50% of India's population is of young generation. Now, if they are not employed, what is going to happen? They will be dependent on their parents. Their liabilities will go up. So it's important that they should be getting employment. So country like India, country like Africa, developing countries, other countries like it's very important to have employment and to have equity. Equity, आप समझते हैं? Equal opportunities to be given to people so that they can become sustainable and can grow. So it's always about a trade-off in terms of, shall we go for economic growth or shall we take care about equitable distribution of income? Depends. So countries have to decide scenario based, time to time, what is more important. Uske accordingly they decide about where to go for tax rebates, where to go for increasing the tax, where should we go for offering subsidies, shall we go for taking loan, if we take loan, how long the loan should be, how much time it will take to repay back, shall the government go for spending more on infrastructure and others, or shall government go for promoting private players to go for it. So it depends where you are as a country and how much damage has been done to the country. So that is what government has to take care about. So there's important concept called automatic stabilizers. Automatic stabilizers are non-discretionary fiscal policy. Sometimes they call it as built-in fiscal mechanism. See, we have shared taxes and subsidies are important component of fiscal policy. अब आप जानते हैं there are different tax slabs. This I've shared prior also. So there are different tax slabs, isn't it? So let's say there are 4 tax slabs, and in this category, in the lowest category here, poor people are there. They have to pay 0 tax, and the highest category have to pay 30% tax. Okay, so these are rich people. These are middle class people. These are upper middle class, and these are middle class people. Okay, so let's say they pay 25% tax and they are paying 10% tax, and the lowest are paying 0% tax. So these are different tax slabs. Now let's say that in a country the inflation goes up. Okay, inflation goes up and economy is not performing well. So if inflation goes up and there's unemployment in the economy, then in that case, what is going to happen? Disposable income of yours will decrease. Disposable income decreases means you may be in this 10% tax bracket, you will go to lower. If you are in 25%, you may slip down to 10%. You are in 30%, you may slip down to 25%, isn't it? So more and more people will be falling in the lower pyramid, isn't it? So if more and more people falling in the lower, then in that case, government tax proceeds will decrease. Tax proceed decreases means government has to go for spending more money. So these are built-in system in the economy where the inflation rate goes up, automatically people disposable income goes down, and then they fall in the lower category. And opposite is true. When there is deflation means the prices are low, people are not spending money, then what is going to happen? Government will inject money, government will offer subsidies. Government offers subsidies, then in that case, what will happen? Disposable income will increase. Disposable income increases means you'll fall in the higher category. Or obviously, when you fall in higher category, your tax proceeds, government tax proceeds will increase. So what government is spending is coming back to the government. It's an automatic stabilizer. Okay, so automatic adjustment in government expenditure and revenue leads to reduces expansions and contractions. Inflation or I would say deflationary demand or inflationary demand can be taken care through taxes and subsidies, which are inbuilt in the system, tax slabs के through, जैसे आप GST में देखिए. So you see, we have to consider, can you explain this? Objective of achieving equitable distribution of income may conflict with the objective of economic growth and efficiency. Yes, equitable distribution means what you have to do. You impose higher and higher taxes on the higher income bracket. Tabhi to government will get more money from the higher set of people, and that money will be given in the form of subsidies, and spending government will go for on the lower income set of people. Okay, so if government start taxing more and more in the higher income bracket, and government start taxing more those people, corporate, those who are earning more and more, what the government is doing? If you are a corporate and to I want to practice as a government equitable distribution, then in that case, I have to take money from you because आपके पास बहुत profit margin है, and you can go for paying me higher capital gain tax. So in that case, I'll take it from you. Corporate tax. So I'll take the corporate tax money from you additional, and I'll pass it on to the poor people. Now, if I'm doing this practice, what will happen to the corporate? Corporate will be disincentivized because I'm imposing high taxes on you. So you will be disincentivized. What will happen to investments in the country? Investments by whom? By private investments will reduce. Agar private investment reduce hoga, then in that case, government has to go for more spending. Because if investments are not there, then employment is not there. Employment is not there means income is not there. So it's a trade-off. Tax kis had tak lagana hai? If we go for imposing higher tax, you are compromising on economic growth. Okay? Okay, so this is the concept which you should understand. Equity is to take care about equal opportunities and bringing balance in the economy. Equality is more about giving equal opportunities to all. Built-in is basically Hiral. अभी आपने देखा tax slabs. Different tax slabs have that power within themselves to take care about any imbalance in the economy to a certain extent. Isn't it? If inflation is higher, then in that case, government can, rather than going for taking care about imposing taxes and others, it is inbuilt. Inflation बढ़ गया means आपकी disposable. Inflation, why inflation is increasing? Because people are spending more, supply less है. So if inflation goes up, obviously आपकी disposable income कम हो गई, you will fall in the lower tax bracket, In that case, you will be going for less consumption. And in that case, government tax proceeds will reduce. Government tax proceeds reduces means the government is liable to go for spending more. Okay? If tax rate will be higher, then corporate will not invest. Absolutely right, Vinay. Will not invest, I won't say that they won't invest, but yes, they go for they get disincentivized, isn't it? To farmers, sometimes there's crop loss due to various reasons. How is the government going to compensate this, ma'am? If there is a loss in terms of, so that is why they have inbuilt crop insurance, government ne introduce kiya hai. And for this crop insurance is their scheme offered to farmers. So they have to pay bare minimum premium, 1 rupee premium they pay. Or unki crop insured ho jati hai. So then in that case, if there's any casualty, then government goes for paying it. So this is how they're taking care about it. Government changes high rates of taxes for lower and middle class people. Ma'am, wouldn't it be prudent for government to charge comparatively less tax for middle class? More people will be encouraged to work harder and become a part of. You're absolutely right, Jayant. Government should go for giving more because middle class people are broader in the category. And if they are given tax benefits, that will help in terms of promoting growth of the country. You're absolutely right. But the problem is that government has to take care about people in the lower income strata. And if they go for giving tax proceeds, unka kam ho jayega na beta. Agar itne bade vast set of middle income group people they go for imposing less tax. So government tax proceeds will reduce, tax proceed reduces. That's what we are sharing about trade-off. Kitna tax impose kare so that it should not hamper. Isn't it? So that's a tricky question for government to work on it. So what happens basically when there's deficit aggregate demand? Deficit aggregate demand means people are apprehensive about that job nahi hoga, income nahi hogi, inflation बढ़ रहा है, so they'll go for spending less. So if they spend less, that means overall demand is reducing. Okay, then what is the benefit of? So we have shared, अगर deficit demand है, And there's the concept of progressive taxation. Progressive taxes means higher the income, higher is the tax level, isn't it? So what happens? Progressive taxation decreases, and then government transfer payments will increase. In the case of deficit, we have shared, if there's deficit demand, aggregate demand, then in that case, people are spending less, jobs are reducing, income is reducing, disposable income will reduce, no? Disposable income of country will reduce, means people will fall in lower and lower income bracket. And because of this, what will happen? Government has to spend on transfer payments. Government की subsidies बढ़ जाएंगी, government के expenses बढ़ जाएंगे. So government has to offer more. And this will increase disposable income, and this will lead to investments to be incentivized. And again, economy will be back on track. So this is how it is inbuilt. So जब tax proceeds कम होता है, transfer receipts बढ़ जाते हैं. So this is inbuilt. If tax proceeds are higher, transfer receipts will decrease. This will be in the reverse scenario. So there is excess demand, then in that case, progressive taxation will increase and transfer payments will decrease. Tax proceeds बढ़ जाएंगी and transfer receipts will reduce, and this will reduce disposable income because transfer receipts कम हो गई. That means you will tax proceeds have gone up and transfer receipts have decreased. So your disposable income will reduce. Your disposable income reduces means investments will reduce, employment will reduce, inbuilt in the system. So there's deficit aggregate demand. It is taken care through this taxes and subsidies, which is already there in the system, inbuilt. Discretion basically, Hiral, means I have a choice as a government कि कहाँ पे spend करना है, कहाँ पे नहीं करना है. Discretionary choice. I can take a call about where to spend, where not to spend, how much to spend, and others. Disposable income, we cannot share. चलिए आप पूछ रहे हो तो मैं बता देती हूँ. वैसे हम all throughout we have been discussing about disposable income. अगर ऐसे बेटा पिछले concepts अगर हम पढ़ने लगे तो हम आगे कैसे बढ़ेंगे? So you should read about what we have already shared. So disposable income basically is income which you can spend on consumption and saving or saving. Okay, and this disposable income depends on what? Total income कितनी है? अगर टैक्स बढ़ते गए तो ये डिस्पोजेबल इनकम कम होती जाएगी, इसलिए माइनस. एंड प्लस ट्रांसफर रिसीट्स. ट्रांसफर रिसीट्स आर सब्सिडीज, अलाउंसेस. जितने ज्यादा ट्रांसफर रिसीट्स एंड अलाउंसेस आपको मिलेंगे उतनी ज्यादा आपकी डिस्पोजेबल इनकम बढ़ती जाएगी. सो दीज आर इनबिल्ट इन द सिस्टम. ओके, बट जब सिनेरियो इज टू बैड, उस केस में दिस ऑटोमेटिक स्टेबलाइजर इज नॉट गोइंग टू वर्क. Okay, so automatic stabilizers affect disposable income. You got it? Disposable income, how? Because disposable income depends on what? Taxes and subsidy and transfer receipts. If taxes goes up, your disposable income goes down. If transfer receipts increases, your disposable income goes up. And disposable income decides what? Your consumption. And consumption is based on what? Taxes and transfer receipts. So this is how, and consumption is a major factor for the economy. अगर आप consume नहीं करेंगे, you are not going to create demand. You think that private players are going to produce? Investment demand, private investment demand in the economy will reduce. Investment demand reduces means employment reduces. Employment reduces means further income goes down. And it's bad for the economy. GDP will reduce. इसीलिए तो कोविड में you saw that GDP went down, isn't it? So discretionary fiscal policy. So one of you were asking about, Hiril was asking about discretion. Discretion means government decides about कहाँ पे spend करना है, किस sector को promote करना है. Should we go for consumption promotion? Should we go for investment promotion of private players? Should we go for promotion of exports? Or should we go for a combination of one or two? Discretionary choice. One is inbuilt, which is going to happen automatically through taxes and transfer receipt. Other is that where government has to take a call. Consumption promote karna hai, investment promote karna hai, or should we go for promoting exports? Should we go for restricting imports? Discretionary, to bring the economy back on track. So they can control government expenditure through taxes and subsidies. Government can influence consumption. Government can influence investment. Government can influence net exports. That is about discretionary policy of the government based on the what are the instruments government has. We have already shared. Government के पास government expenditure होता है. Government can spend, and we have shared government expenditure multiplier. Remember, the delta Y by delta G is equal to 1 upon 1 minus MPC. And this delta Y depicts what? GDP. If it is going to increase, GDP of the country is going to increase. Government expenditure. Government can spend on revenue expenditure. Government can spend on capital expenditure. Abhi is budget mein Nirmala Sitharaman had taken care of, emphasized a lot on capital expenditure. Because capital expenditure mein kya hoga? Government will be spending on flyovers, infrastructure, roads, other segments. Because of that, this income will increase, GDP will increase. Taxes, we have shared. Taxes can be direct tax, that can be indirect tax. Aapko pata hai. Taxes can be in terms of corporate tax, property tax, wealth tax, sales tax, VAT and others. Okay. Then public debt. Government can raise it through bonds. Government bonds issue करती है market में, उसके through raise कर सकती है. Government raises through treasury bills. T-bills are there. Government raises through this for the short-term period. Okay, it's government budget. They go for making a plan that how much we have to spend. But what happens in the case of government budget? Government plans it prior about the expenses. So expenses सारे plan कर लेती हैं. But for receipts they look for. So for revenue they decide about इससे मिलेगा हमको. We'll get this tax proceed. We'll get this much money. But expenses are freezed. And that is the reason what happens here. Expenses exceeds then revenue, and this leads to gap that is known as deficit. And then when there is deficit, government has to go for borrowings. Because you see, how do we plan our budget? Government का budget कैसे different होता है from our budget? We plan our budget. First, we know this is our income and this is how we should spend. Government works in a reverse manner. Government first plans about expenditure. On these things we have to spend. Uske baad they look for what are the sources through which we can meet these expenses. Okay, so government budget is a complete layout where they decide about how much tax to be imposed. Aapne agar government budget suna hai over the period of time, you know about the basic components of budget. Okay. Disposable income due to external factors like Russia-Ukraine crisis. आप देख रहे हो, this because of Russia crisis, Russia is a major player in oil. तभी तो आप देख रहे हो every day petrol prices are increasing. अगर आपका petrol price बढ़ता जाएगा बेटा, तो what is going to happen? You will be spending more on petrol. Inflation बढ़ेगा तो आपकी disposable income country की कम हो जाएगी. Disposable income reduces means consumption demand will reduce. Consumption demand reduces, then you know the impact. So it's adversely affecting. It has an adverse impact. Okay, so external factors definitely make impact. Import bill बढ़ता जाता है, आपका रुपी depreciate होता जा रहा है. इसीलिए आप देखिए 72, 74, 75, $1 equal to. और जितना ज्यादा रुपी डाउनफॉल होगा, उतना ज्यादा पेट्रोल एक्सपेंसिव होता जाएगा. Because after all, we are borrowing from the international market. और कंट्री का उतना ही डेफिसिट बढ़ता जाएगा. So it's a problem. It's a problem what is happening in the international market. And that affects government expenses and receipts also. Okay, so government expenditure, government takes care about through government. If it wants to promote consumption, then government will go for what? Reduces taxes, promoting subsidies, heads investment, then government will go for imposing less corporate tax on corporate investments will increase. Transfer payments, government can go for offering excise duty subsidies, can go for offering subsidies to consumers. Interest may, food may, non-food items may. Okay, essential items mean. So this is how government, we have shared current expenditure, capital expenditure, this you know. Now we have shared in the normal scenario, but if things are very bad, if things are bad, there's depression, जैसे 1930s में हुआ, जैसे recession हुआ during COVID time, things are bad. अभी भी अगर आपने सुना होगा, this time when budget was announced, Madam Nirmala Sitharaman, our finance minister, in the budget she used the term pump priming. Pump priming basically, so it is about in the adverse circumstances, okay? So this is something abnormal, depression, जैसे COVID में हुआ, not exactly depression, but depression was extreme case. I would say when the things are not in normal manner happening. So COVID, what happened during COVID? During COVID, private investment demand went down, isn't it? Corporate were not investing. Why they were not investing in this at the same pace? Because one, banks were hesitant to lend them. Default hoga. So why should we go for lending? Okay. So banks were reluctant to lend. And if the demand is not there enough, we will be having inventories piled up. And these inventories will lead to what? Blockage of funds. So if the funds are blocked here, then in that case, what is going to happen? One, you are not generating enough. And secondly, you have blocked your funds here. So corporate were not investing. Investment demand by private sector was less. And you remember this is which demand? We have shared C plus I plus G plus X minus N. Okay, this is this demand. Now this demand is less. If corporate investment demand is less, that means they are producing less. They are producing less means they'll hire less people. Employment will reduce. इसकी वजह से consumption demand भी कम हो जाएगी. In that case, government has to spend more. Government का expenditure बढ़ जाएगा. Tax proceeds कम हो जाएंगी. Isn't it? So this will adversely affect. So in this scenario, what government wants to do, what is pump priming basically? Pump pricing basically means that pump pricing basically means आपको you understand जैसे कि hand pumps आपने देखी कभी hand pump what happens, you have to move it once or twice, the pressure builds up, and once the pressure builds up, then water starts coming, isn't it? So that pressure for that water to come out is government will inject money in one go. So government first time, otherwise आपने देखा होगा जब lower head tank है आपका and you have a tank on the roof of like a upper head tank है आपका एक, okay, so you have to put water in the upper head tank from the lower head tank, and there's a motor which is there, and this motor there's air in that motor. कभी कभी ऐसा होता है ना, because of that it is not pulling water up, so there's a air in the that motor, so आपको उसको air को remove करना पड़ता है. Once you remove that air by putting some water, then it pulls water up and then it starts working in a normal manner. This happens in the economy also. What happened during COVID? Private investment was not happening. Now it is government which had to inject money in one go. So government said that we are injecting money in the economy through capital expenditure. We are going to create roads, we are going to create flyover, and we are keeping 0.1% of our GDP for capital expenditure. Government is going to invest in one go. Okay, so if government is going to invest in one go, then in that case, what is going to happen? Government ने शुरू किया, that motivates private investments. These players will also take some initiative. Okay, fine, the economy is coming slightly on track. Let's also go for investment. These people will start investing because there's some optimism in the market. So they start investing. Then in that case, they hire people, output goes up, output is increasing. Obviously, they'll hire people, consumption demand will increase, and employment will increase. Government expenses will decrease over the period of time, and economy will be back on track. Isn't it? So this is pump priming. What is pump priming? Once in one shot, government will go for spending money in the economy. Why should government go for? To boost investment by private players, to motivate them to invest in the economy. And once they start doing it, economy will be back on track. Okay. Okay, so pump priming, that is pump priming. So I should take one example here because I had quoted somewhere. I'll come back here. Yes. Can you see this? The center pump priming and pump priming the center's budget. This is about budget 2021-22. The budget, center's budget, I'm sorry. Okay, so the budget, center budget, CapEx. CapEx means capital expenditure for the next fiscal coming year is pegged. Pegged means just the upper limit. 7.5 trillion. 7.5 trillion rupees government inject karegi economy mein through capital expenditure, up 36% from the revised estimate. 36% is more than what they had decided prior. Current year, though its total expenditures budget is to grow by is budgeted to grow by very modest 4.6%. It is desired to improve quality of spending. Why is it required? Because this is going to take care about motivating private players. Government ने invest किया 7.5 trillion and government expenditure is a multiplier, which will boost investments by private player in the economy, and that will help the economy to be back on track. So this is as per the current budget. So what you are reading is actually happening in the market. That's the beauty. Okay. So what happened in the case of pump priming? Pump priming is one-shot money invested. So the pump priming is basically certain amount of money, public spending under different conditions will have effect of setting the economy on the way towards full utilization of resources without further aid from government. Government has invested one go. This will set the momentum for private players. Once this refers to increase in private investment through injection of fresh purchasing power. Obviously, government expenditure leads to what? Generation of multiple income. Income increases means consumption increases. That makes private player also, wow, income is increasing in the country, people are spending. Why not? We should also start producing. So they also start producing, and this leads to increase in GDP of the country. Pump priming. Is it clear? Alcohol import is also increasing. Ban is not imposed by any state nor government. नहीं भार्गवी, अल्कोहल और पेट्रोल को मत कंपेयर करो बेटा. पेट्रोल तो इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर बेसिक, श्रीलंका में सारा एक्सपोर्ट टोटली स्टॉप हो गया है, स्टक हो गया है, बिकॉज वहां पे दे डू नॉट हैव ऑयल, इसीलिए इंडिया उनको सप्लाई कर रहा है ऑयल, because people are not getting basic food. So petrol is something different than alcohol. You cannot compare these two things. Anyways, so pump priming clear hai aap logon ko? Okay, so that's the concept of pump priming. Second is compensatory spending. Compensatory spending is that since private players are not investing only, let us invest. So government के पास option ही नहीं है. Government is having no option since the private players are not investing only, so we have to compensate for bringing the economy back on track by investing. Okay, so that's the difference. So pump priming and compensatory spending में differentiate करते हैं आप. Pump priming is basically what? Pump priming is one way of government, in one shot government is spending, capital expenditure government is incurring, and that is creating momentum for the private players to invest. And once they start investing, the economy is back on track. Uske baad government is not supposed to So what is the basic idea of government in the pump priming case? Let's motivate private investment in the economy to bring the economy back on track. But compensatory spending is that since private players are not doing it only, जैसे कोविड के केस में हुआ, compensatory spending. So private were not doing, so that is why government was government had no option, they had to go for it, compensatory spending. Okay, so I hope prime, and this is clear to you people, prime pumping and this one compensatory spending is clear to you. Okay. So we have already shared Kin's model, government spending multiplier. You remember government spending multiplier? What is government spending multiplier? Government spending multiplier is delta Y by delta G is equal to 1 upon 1 minus MPC. What is MPC? MPC is change in consumption to change in income. If I say that consumption function is, remember consumption function is A, B, Y, D. What is this A? A is autonomous. What is B? B is MPC. What is YD is disposable income. Let's say if I write consumption is equal to 40 plus 0.5 YD. Okay, 0.5 YD. And in this case, if I say that government expenditure is 7,000 crores. Okay, so delta G is 7,000 crores. Okay, so if I have given you this 7,000 crore, आपको ये पता है, you can find out the change in income. That is government spending multiplier. We have already done this concept. Okay, so you know this. So increase in government purchases from, you can see in this graph, which will make you further clear. Okay, this is what aggregate supply, isn't it? This is aggregate supply. This is a condition of equilibrium where aggregate supply is equal to total expenditure. This is aggregate demand. So rather than आप लिख सकते हैं इसको AD dash और इसको आप लिख सकते हैं AD. And this is aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply. That is equilibrium. Okay. So this is what is happening. You are here. Economy is performing here at point A. And this is the equilibrium. Now government goes for spending. So government expenditure increases from G to G dash. If government expenditure increases, then the income increases in the country from Y to Y dash. This is known as, and the equilibrium moves from A to B. This is known as government expenditure multiplier. Okay, so basically because of government expenditure, income in the country increases, and that is known as national income in the country increases, output increases, and employment increases. What happens in the case of tax multiplier? What happens in the case of tax multiplier? We have done tax multiplier also, अगर आपको याद है तो. What is tax multiplier? How do we calculate tax multiplier? Anyone here? So tax multiplier, in the case of tax multiplier, what is delta Y by delta T is equal to minus B upon 1 minus MPC. That is, or you can write as delta Y by delta T is equal to minus B upon 1 minus B. This is tax multiplier. So what you see, minus B means disposable income will decrease. So tax will always have negative impact. Agar badega to. If it goes down, definitely it helps. So tax multiplier is leakage. And government expenditure is injection in the economy. Acha, graph. Is it okay now? Simple concept hai. Yes. Okay, so you know this concept. This is what? This is aggregate supply curve. इसके हर point पे aggregate demand and aggregate supply is equal. But actual demand, aggregate demand is this blue in the country. If this aggregate demand is blue in the country, equilibrium is at YE, and output income is at YE and equilibrium is at A. that means economy is at performing at a lower level. There's deficit demand. Deficit demand में हमने पढ़ा है. What is going to happen in deficit demand? Government goes for spending. Government goes for spending. That means if government spends, economy moves from A to B, and income increases from Y to Y dash. Why it happens? It happens because of government expenditure multiplier. Simple example आप लीजिए flyovers का, metros का. What is happening because of metro? Government has spent on metro. It has created job for so many people. So jobs are created. That means there is disposable income. And if they spend, let's say they spend 50, they spend 50 crores, then in that case, agar MPC 0.5 hai, so 25 crore further aa gaya system mein, and then 12.5 further aa gaya, and then 6.25 further aa gaya. So you see here how many multiples of income is generated, and this income generation will bring it, will shift it from Y to Y dash. That's the government expenditure multiple. We have done this concept. आप प्लीज सारे चैप्टर्स पिछले जो कर चुके हैं हम, आप उसको रिवाइज कीजिए. Okay, so tax multiplier also we have done. So what is the tax multiplier impact? You can see here, what is the impact of tax multiplier? MPC आपका कम हो जाएगा because we have shared YD is what? YD is Y minus tax plus transfer receipts. अगर tax government की तरफ से बढ़ गया, then in that case your disposable income will decrease. Disposable income decreases means will consume less. Will consume less means you will move from this blue to red. That means income in the country will reduce. So tax का impact negative होता है. You can see here, income reduces from Y to Y dash, and this is decrease in income. Why? Because the tax rate has gone up. Okay, so balance budget में क्या होगा? If government taxes change in the tax rate is equal to transfer receipts. Whatever government is imposing you on taxes, the same government is giving you back. So that means it is a balanced budget multiplier, isn't it? So balanced budget multiplier means the taxes of the government is equal to subsidies given, the transfer receipts given. So balanced budget multiplier is delta G is equal to delta T. आपको tax multiplier पता है, आपको government multiplier पता है, so you can find out this is what? This is government multiplier, and this is tax multiplier, isn't it? That brings change in income. अगर ये दोनों बराबर होंगे, तो then there will be no change in income, isn't it? Because this will be equal to this, so there will be no change in income. Balanced budget multiplier. Okay, balanced budget multiplier. Government multiplier we have done. So let's say that MPC is 0.6. What is the value of government spending? You have to find out the value of government spending. What would be the impact of 50 billion increase in government spending on equilibrium? So what is given to you? There should be one more component given. आपको MPC दिया है. So you can find out MPC, what will be the impact? MPC का impact क्या होगा? You know, 1 upon government expenditure multiplier is 1 upon 1 minus MPC. That is 1 minus 0.6. That is equal to 1 upon 0.4. Or sorry, this is 0.4. And respectively, you can find out 2.5. So income in the country will increase by 2.5. 2.5 times income will increase in the country. Government spending. What is the value of government spending if 0.6 is given? This is not complete. This you cannot find out until unless they give you one more component here. 50 billion increase in government spending. What would be the impact of 50 billion increase in government spending? If they give you delta Y, तब तो आप delta G निकाल लेंगे, because 1 minus MPC आपको दिया हुआ है. This is given 50 billion. So you can find out delta Y. So you can find out delta Y. What will be the value of delta Y here? Okay, so 2.5 delta Y will be 125 billion. Yes, right. Actually, yes, you're right. 2.5. Okay. So suppose this is the question given. Um, this is about average per capita income of a country increases from 42,300 to 50,000, and per capita consumption increases from, मेरे ख्याल से हम कर चुके हैं पहले. Have we done it? The consumption increases from 35,400 to 42,500. So आपको इसमें what is given to you? You have been given change in income. This is change in income 50,000 minus 42,300 और change in consumption आपको दिया है. So you have got this. Okay. So you can find out what is the value of multiplier. MPC आपको पता चल जाएगा इससे. Once you get MPC, then you know the formula of multiplier. So you can calculate this. Absolutely. So you can see here, you can find out consumption आपने निकाल लिया, increase in consumption or increase in income, and then you get multiplier value. Multiplier is 12.83. Simple है, isn't it? So you can do it. MPC आपने calculate कर लिया. MPC, how do you get MPC? Change in consumption to change in income. Once you get this 0.92, then you know multiplier is 1/1 minus MPC. ये formula आपको पता होना चाहिए. You can calculate. So the value of multiplier is 12.83. Okay, so this is how you get it. Tax multiplier is having negative impact. So let's say that increase in the tax of rupees 20 crores will result in decline in income of 60 crores. So you know the formula. अगर आपको MPC दिया है 3/4, that is 0.75. So if MPC is given 0.75 and they have given you increase in tax of 20 crores. So you can find out MPC into, you know the formula of the tax multiplier. So this is how you'll do. $12.83. Absolutely right, Hitesh. Okay, so this we have already done. This you can see, this is simple what we have done. What is this? This is government multiplier, this is tax multiplier, isn't it? बस आपको ये याद रखना है. Then you can substitute. अगर MPC 0.5 है, then what will be the value of government expenditure multiplier will be 2, but the tax multiplier value will be -1. If MPC is 0.8, government expenditure multiplier will be 5, but value of tax multiplier will be -4. So when you multiply this with income of the country, income कम होगी ना? इस case में income will be multiple of 2, multiple of 5, multiple of 10. And that is what we had shared. That अगर आप tax impose कर रहे हो, तो then you are losing income. That means you are making people go in a lower income bracket. To what extent you should go for it? That's it. Okay. So I hope this is clear. Let's go for taking a break. So this is clear. Tax multiplier is negative, and which is 1 less than the investment multiplier or government expenditure multiplier. Government expenditure multiplier and tax multiplier are also called fiscal multipliers because ये fiscal measures हैं. And these multipliers are associated with the fiscal activities of the government, that is changes in. We'll discuss about public debt after break, or we have 1 moment. Let's take a break at 7:30, 20, it is 29. Let's finish up with this public debt. Okay, so public debt is about debt government takes when the government has to take debt, when government expenses exceeds its receipts. This is greater than its receipts. Government will have deficit here, and this deficit they meet it through debt. Debt can be internal. Internal means within India. How do they do? Through market forces. Treasury bills ke through, bonds ke through, they can raise in India. So treasury bill is short term. They raise it for short term. These are government securities. These are issued by Reserve Bank of India. So people can invest in this. Once people buy these treasury bills, money goes to Reserve Bank of India, and Reserve Bank of India is a custodian of Government of India. So it gives money to Government of India. So government gets money through this. So these are short-term debt instruments issued by Government of India. And on behalf of Government of India, it is taken care by RBI. And they are issued for 91 days, 182 days, and 360. So these are basically short-term. Bonds are for long-term, 7 years, 10 years, 11 years, 20 years. Okay, so this is for long-term, this is for short-term. And then NSC certificates hote hain, national saving certificates hote hain, national. So government also gets money through small savings also. People go for pension funds also. Uske through bhi they get money through. Okay, so that is how different ways through which government gets money. So that is through small savings. So one is through debt, short term and long term. Short term is through treasury bills, and long term is through bonds, and other is through small savings, which can be public borrowings through national savings certificates, with जो लोग पोस्ट ऑफिस में जो लोग सेविंग्स करते हैं, देन पीपल गो फॉर ये पेंशन फंड्स का जो कॉन्सेप्ट गवर्नमेंट ने शुरू किया उसमें करते हैं, दैट मनी गोज टू government. So that is about money, savings of the people, what government get through that. Okay. Then external is through bonds and others. International market में raise करते हैं, that is external. So they raise it in international market, that is external. चाहे आप borrow करो or you borrow from IMF या फिर आप bonds के through raise करो in international market. So India can raise in international market through bonds also, and foreign people will be investing in that. So you get it from foreign people, and then you are liable to pay to them. Okay. So balanced budget हमने कर लिया है. Leakage in taxes, you understand. Leakages, taxes are leakages. Why taxes are leakages? Because ये आपके disposable income को कम करते हैं. And investments are injections because it increases your disposable income. It increases investments in the economy. Isn't it? अगर YD कम होगा, consumption कम होगा, तो investments भी तो कम होंगे. Okay, so balanced budget multiplier we have already done. So let's take a break and then we'll start with further to go ahead with it. Okay. So 10 minutes break. They do pay, Ankur, they do pay like interest in the terms. They are offered at discount. They are offered at discount and then you get the money. So suppose 100 rupees ka hai, so they will be offering you at 98. So 2 rupees ka gain you will get. That is how they offer at discount always normally. So you get through that treasury bills. Mein short term hota hai. It's a secure investments. People go for investing in it. Mutual funds karte hain. Many people they go for it, and you also invest in mutual funds, so you can go for investing in treasury bills. So money goes to government through treasury bills. Banks karte hain. Banks also buy treasury bills. These are secured, no? Secured investments. Okay, so let's take a break and then we'll go ahead after 10 minutes, okay? Okay, so what we had discussed till now is clear, I believe, to all of you. Now we are talking about three categories here. See, the budget can be balanced, which is a very, very remote possibility. If budget is balanced, that means government expenses and receipts are same. That means the leakages are equal to injections. That means what government is spending on terms of subsidies and capital expenditure, current expenditure, which is equal to government receipts in terms of receipts of tax and non-tax receipts for the government is going to get it. Okay, so that is if taxes are equal to, if the leakages are equal to injections, that means what goes out of the government kitty and what government gets it back is equal. That means there's no change in aggregate demand. We have shared that. If the tax rate is equal to government expenditure, taxes are leakages and government expenditure is injection. If these two are equal, then there's no effect on aggregate demand. But in the case of deficit budget means government expenses exceeds government receipts. That means leakages are more, injections are more than here in that case, because injections are greater than the leakages in the deficit budget. Because why? Because government is spending, no, government is spending more and the government is getting less through the other form. So leakages are less as compared to injections are more. In that case, this leads to budget deficit. Now, if government expenses exceed this receipts, that means what is going to happen? Government has to go for borrowing. So it adds debt if there's deficit budget. If government expenses are more, because government expenditure is injection, you know, in the country, and leakages are taxes. That means if tax proceeds are less, that is leakages are less as compared to injection, that is government expenditure is more, that means it is leading to debt. Government debt will increase because it's, and if it continues over a period of time, total past deficit, total past receipts. If deficits increases, yahi hua Sri Lanka mein, their deficits kept on increasing as compared to their receipts, and that resulted in huge debt for them. Okay, so national debt goes up when a country is continuously running in deficit over a period of time. That leads to increase in debt. Surplus budget is what? Surplus budget is when government imposes more tax proceeds and gets more through tax, then government goes for spending. So delta T in that case will be more for, and net effect will be what? Net effect on the aggregate demand will be less. No, aggregate demand will decrease because government is spending less, but government is gaining more through tax proceeds. That is surplus budget. It will definitely help to reduce national debt because government is in surplus. It will lead to increase in savings since people are not able to spend that much. So savings increases in the economy because the government tax proceeds are higher. This reduces interest rates because overall aggregate demand is less. So aggregate demand is less means it is deficit demand. If it is deficit demand, then in that case, interest rates will reduce overall. It decreases national borrowings because government is in surplus. So borrowings reduces and debt reduces. It reduces current account deficit. Current account deficit means government import bills will reduce. Because they can fund it through surplus, no? So their current account deficit will reduce. Vice versa is true in deficit budget. Deficit budget, national debt increases. Because of increase in national debt, the government borrowings increases and current account deficit increases. So there's a cost involved. There's a cost involved of deficit budget. And surplus, you cannot afford to go because if you are increasing tax rate, then what is going to happen? Your economy will be on the downturn. Agar aap ek threshold limit beyond, if you go for increasing the tax rate, who will be ready to pay that tax? And people will be not having enough income in future to pay for the tax, isn't it? So surplus budget is not possible. Countries across the world, they practice deficit budget. हाँ बिल्कुल, I've shared, Ankur, लोन्स और टैक्सेस के अलावा गवर्नमेंट के पास नॉन टैक्स रिसीट्स भी होती हैं, जैसे चालान है, फीस है, फाइन है, आपका प्रॉपर्टी रजिस्ट्रेशन है. दैट इज ऑल इनकम व्हिच गोज टू गवर्नमेंट. देन अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, जैसे 2G स्पेक्ट्रम, 3G स्पेक्ट्रम, 4G स्पेक्ट्रम, दैट इज गवर्नमेंट इनकम. अब नाउ दे आर गोइंग फॉर LIC का IPO, so that is also whatever income the government will get through LIC, disinvestments के through. Some shares they go for selling of public sector undertakings. That's also the source of revenue for the government. Okay, there are different sources for government apart from tax and apart from tax. These are non-tax. So fiscal policy can be expansionary or it can be recessionary, contractionary. Expansionary, when government has to go for expansionary, when aggregate demand is, because it's a correction, no, it's a correction strategy. So if aggregate demand is less, then government has to go for expansionary. Expansionary mein government kya karegi? Government expenditure will increase, isn't it? Government tax will reduce, transfer receipts will increase. Expansionary. Contractionary, when government will go for contractionary, when aggregate demand will be high, that means inflation hoga economy mein. If there's inflation, then in that case government will go for reducing government expenditure, government will go for increasing the tax rate, government will reduce transfer receipts. Contractionary. Okay, and we have shared fiscal policy is a demand side policy, isn't it? It is a demand side policy, so it takes care about demand. This is about aggregate demand. So aggregate demand, if it is in the downturn, government goes for expansionary fiscal policy, and if there is high inflation, then government goes for contractionary fiscal policy. They want to control aggregate demand, they want to contraction of business cycle. जैसे कोविड के केस में, that was they anticipated contraction होगा economy में, so they had gone for expansionary fiscal policy. Okay, actual aggregate demand is less than the required full limit. So economy at expansionary, when the government will go for fiscal expansionary policy, when there is underemployment. Underemployment. Income is low. Okay, so this is unemployment is high, income is low, national income is low. So that's about the case. Increasing unemployment. So in the case of increasing unemployment, government will go for expansionary. Decreasing aggregate demand is low. Slump in economy means economy is not growing. GDP growth rate is low. So then in that case, government has to go for expansionary fiscal policy. We have shared in the for combating. So you can see this graph, okay? This is very important to understand it, because normally आप लोग graphs में गड़बड़ करते हैं. Potential means what you're capable of. Okay, so you look at this graph here, okay? This I have taken it from your study material only. You can see here, this is long run average supply. LAS is long run average supply. SAS is short term average supply. Okay, this talks about potential. Okay, this is aggregate demand, this is aggregate demand too. Now let's say the economy is performing at this point, Y1. Okay, so economy is performing at Y1. What is the price level in the economy is P1? Income hai Y1. Okay, so this is income, this is the price level. And here the economy is performing. Now, classical economists, what classical economists believed about? Is there any role of aggregate demand in classical economics? No. Their concept is about supply only, isn't it? So they said if the prices are going to increase, the wages are going to reduce, because you remember we have shared that the wages in that case, so you can see here, wages would reduce. Wages reduces means the cost of production will reduce, cost of production reduces, and aggregate supply would increase. So what is, according to the classical concept, I'm sorry. According to the classical concept, if prices are going to increase, then in that case, wage rate will go for, if there is this case, wage rate will go for adversely impacting. They will reduce because there is deficit demand in the economy. People are not demanding, so let's go for producing less. And because you're on the lower side, no? So production, so wages will decrease. Wages reduces means cost of production reduces. This curve, which you see is here, S1. This will shift to supply will increase. Why supply will increase? According to classical economists, because wages are flexible. You remember, wages and price are flexible. So if there's deficit demand nahi hai, so why should producers produce? So they'll not go for more production, so they'll go for less wage rate. Wages, I'm sorry, I'll write it again. So they go for lowering down wage rate. In the case of deficit demand. So lowering down of wage rate. And this lowering down of wage rate results in what? Lowering down of cost. So the cost reduces means aggregate supply will. I'm so sorry. Aggregate supply will increase. So this aggregate supply, which you see, is switching over from SA1 to SA2. And if it switch over from here, economy moves from this point to this point. That means income increases in the economy and economy is back on track. Isn't it? But in actual world, what Keynes said about is it actually happening? If the economy is on the downturn, is it possible for the employer to decrease the wage rate? ऐसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में कौन काम करेगा जो आप frequently wage rate change करते हो, and especially when there's downturn in the economy. When there's downturn in the economy, can you go for reducing the wage rate of people? You cannot. No, it's not so easy. So when there's a downturn in the economy, then wages are rigid. We have shared this wage rigidity concept, which was given by Keynes. No, wage rigidity. So prices and wages are rigid. It's not so easy to go for changing it. So that is, this way of bringing economy back on track is not correct. So what Keynes said about here, the government has to take the charge. Now, if economy is performing at A, and ideally it should be at B, because it should be at Y2 level. This should be the actual one, where the economy should be performing. But it is performing here. Okay, so to be here at Y2 and at equilibrium B from A to B, what is going to happen? Government will go for offering subsidies. Government will go for spending. Government, that will generate multiplier impact, and this multiplier impact will lead to change in aggregate demand from AD to AD2, and economy will move from Y1 to Y2. And this is how the deficit, this is which policy? Expansionary policy in the case of deficit aggregate demand. Because demand is at AD1, ideally it should have been at AD2. So this is deficit demand. This deficit demand can be overcome with government spending and government multiplier, with promotion of expenses and transfer receipts, reducing tax rate, expansionary fiscal policy. Okay. So this is wages would reduce. Ye classical ne kaha, but actually Keynes, what he said? Keynes said that when there's downturn, then nobody wants to go for ready to accept low wage rate. So wages are sticky in nature. Sticky means you cannot go for reducing wage so flexibly the way classical have said about. Okay, so wages will not accommodate this unemployment. A recession hoga, that means aggregate demand will be low, and in that case, what is required? Keynes said that government expenditure should increase to bring the economy back on track. Okay, so increase in public expenditure at such a time, it can happen through two things. We have already shared: pump priming and compensatory spending. So if there is low aggregate demand, जैसे आपने COVID के case में देखा, then in that case, government can go for some measures. It can be in the terms of one go injecting money in the economy. So, and the objective is to increase private investment and generate fresh purchasing power to increase public expenditure. Okay. So this is about, and this is the example of pump I've already given you. So little water is poured into a pump to prime it. And this is how the pump priming concept has come. Okay. So जो water tank नहीं होता उसमें जो motor होती है, that motor helps to pull water from the lower tank to the upper head tank. And for that, you need to pump it once, and once you do it, and then it takes it at such a force and the tank gets filled. That's about pump. So here they have established analogy with respect to a government going for prime, and that results in leading to endless flow of water. By whom? The supply of water is in terms of investments. Flow of investments by whom? By private players. Private investments. That's the concept. So once government has injected money, then it creates momentum for the private investments in the economy and brings economic back on track. That's pump priming. Smoothly forever. So it is a one go job. That's it. That's why government has gone for capital expenditure. Why prices increase from P to combat recession? P1 to P2. No. See what's happening. You see the impact here. What they said about you are at P3. Where are you? You are at P3. You are not P2. That is what they believed. Classical economists believe, and that's why we are not able to agree with it. You are here. You are at this point. According to Keynes, this point. This point should be there. You move from this point to this point in the case of aggregate demand, and you be here ideally. But it's not possible because it is a supply front problem. It cannot happen. That's why government has to go for it, and that's why it leads to increase in the price. Over the period, prices are going to increase. That is how economy is going to sustain, no? Price is the motivating factor for producers to produce. So moderate price increase to hoga hi. Then only this will lead to, if the prices are low, you understand, if the prices are low, then private investment will not happen. So to lead to private investment in the economy in the future, because government expenditure increases, it increases your purchasing power, that means disposable income goes up, you buy more, and the price level in the economy will definitely increase. जैसे country progress करता जाता है, वैसे वैसे price level भी तो बढ़ता जाता है, isn't it? So over the period of time from recession, it is not to combat recession, but once you overcome recession, that leads to increase in the price level with increase in income in the economy. Okay, so this is clear. Compensatory spending, I've already told you, when the things are, when the government loses hope that private players are not going to invest, then they go for investing in the market in that case. Okay. Why would government will go for increase in unemployment? Where government is increasing unemployment? When did I say that government goes for increasing unemployment? Government never goes for increasing unemployment. Why should government go for increasing unemployment? I never said. Yukti, I have never said that it goes for increasing unemployment. कौन सा reference बोल रहे हो आप point? I'm not getting it. Okay, so impact of government expenditure, what happens because of that accommodative expansionary monetary policy we have shared when the aggregate demand is low. So if aggregate demand is low, then in that case, government goes for expansionary fiscal policy. And this, they do it with accommodative monetary policy. What is accommodative monetary policy? Interest rate, they will not go for increasing. So if expansionary fiscal policy is there and if interest rate increases, then the prices will increase. So what do they do? Now your answer you will get interest rate increases, but money supply does not increase, and that will lead to affect private investment because interest rates will increase and the interest rate investments. If you go for expansionary monetary policy, fiscal policy, interest rates in the economy will increase. So if interest rate increases, investment costs will increase. Investment costs will increase. That means it will hamper private investments in the economy. So what is required? They do it through monetary policy. So only expansionary fiscal policy is not going to help. You have to take care through monetary policy also. And that is how interest rate are kept constant. So if you keep interest rate constant, then in that case, the prices will not increase to that extent. आप लोगों की query, Mansha, your query will be clear if you look at this example here. Just see it very carefully. National income of the country, you know, taxes आपको दिया है 0.3y. Okay. Consumption is given to you. Consumption equation is given to you. Investment is given. Government spending is given. Exports are given. Imports are given. Now we have to calculate equilibrium. Okay. So let's say initial equilibrium is where y is equal to aggregate demand. सारे components आप values रख दीजिए उसमें replace कीजिए and you get, let's say you get a value of national income at 5454. ठीक है, आपको everything is given to you in this question. Y is national income, tax आपको दिया है 0.3y, consumption आपको दिया है 200, function is given. This is what? This is autonomous consumption. This is MPC. This is Y. This is tax. Okay, this is given to you. Then further, so C is given to you. Tax rate is given. यहाँ पे आप tax substitute कर देंगे. So this equation of yours will become 200 plus 0.9 Y minus 0.3 Y. And okay, so this is C. So once you have got this C, investment आपको दिया 600, government spending is given 1000, exports are given and imports are given. So you know at equilibrium Y is equal to AD. You substitute all the values. This is consumption. This is investment. This is consumption. This is government expenditure. This is exports. This is imports. Okay. So we add up all these, that is equal to equilibrium. Once you substitute, you get the value of Y as 5454. Okay. So let's say it is 5454 crore. Economy is performing at this point. Now assume that the full employment level will go back to that. Remember Y and Y1. So here the economy is, this is 5454. Full employment was on the right side of it. Y1 was on the right side of it. That is 6,000 rupees. Okay. 6,000 crores. So where the economy has to actually, Y should be 6,000. But that means it should be at 6,000, but actually the economy is performing at 5454. So this is deficit demand. Deficit demand is how much? 556. So this is deficit. Okay, so this is the deficit demand where we saw AD on the lower side with respect to AD1. So aggregate demand is on the lower side because of this. So this is the deficit demand of 556 is the deficit demand. Now, the point is that we shared that government has to go for expansionary policy. So how much government should go for spending here to incorporate this change here? So what government has to do? So government, so let's refix this equation. You take 6,000 on the left side और आप इस केस में G को unknown variable ले लीजिए. Government expenditure is unknown. Now you calculate again the equation and you find that government expenditure is 1240. How much initial was the government expenditure? 1,000. But the required is 1240. That means deficit is of 240. So is the government should go for 240 crores to bring the economy to 6,000 crores? Government should go for 240 crores to bring the economy to 6,000 crores? No. Why should government not go for 240 crores? In this case, simply government will go for as per the multiplier. So if they go for the multiplier value, they should be able to get 240. And once they get 240 crores here, that will bring the economy back track. Now you see this graph again. Okay. Just see it once again. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, so you take it once more and try to understand this. Okay, just see this graph here. You are at Y1. What is the level of 5454, I believe? You are here at 5454. Okay, so I should take some other color. Let's go for this. Okay. So you are at here at 5454. You should be here at 6,000. Now this is the gap here. This gap can be met by government expenditure. That is what Keynes said about. That means the aggregate demand should increase. Supply will remain here only. Supply cannot change. Because in short term, we have shared fiscal policy takes care about what? Yaad rakhiye, fiscal policy is about demand policy. And this notion is based on what? Keynes' notion. And this graph is taking care about what? It's taking care from supply front. Supply front concept was given by whom? Classical, JB say. But this is not valid, reason being if there is lack of aggregate demand in the economy, if economy is underperforming, then in that case, private investments will not increase. And that is why government has to go for spending money. And that is what is resulting in increase in the aggregate demand, which moves. So what is happening here? Aggregate demand was here. This was the aggregate demand, initially AD1, and economy was performing here. This was the position. Now what happens? Aggregate demand increases and the equilibrium shifts to the higher point, B point. Now your concern is prices increases from P1 to P2. Yes, price level increases in the economy with increase in the economic growth rate over the period of time, but the increase in the price level is less than the increase in national income of the country. So it's moderate increase in the price level. And that is acceptable because as aggregate demand increases, people go for purchasing. And since people go for purchasing, maybe aggregate supply cannot meet up to that in the short span of time. This results in increase, moderate increase in the price level. So that is acceptable, but you see the increase in income is more than the increase in price level. Okay, so this is valid. This is not. Because wages are rigid. Okay, that's the concept. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so this is clear. Classical economics concept समझ में आ गया आपको. Sticky prices, wages. See, everything is correlated. जो हमने पहले पढ़ा, अगर आपको वो नहीं समझ में आएगा, it will become very difficult to connect. That's so the initial question was about economics कैसे पढ़े. तो हर चैप्टर को आपको कनेक्ट करना होगा बेटा, all throughout. If you are not going to connect, you will find it difficult, because each chapter is like a simple para. You start from a word to sentence to para to writing story and so on and so on. This is how economics is all about. Okay. In fact, all subjects are like that. चाहे आप accounts कहें या कुछ भी कहें, so it is all interconnected, isn't it? अगर fundamentals आपके clear नहीं है right from the beginning, you cannot score. So compensatory is clear to all of you. Compensatory, what is the difference between compensatory and pump priming? It's clear, I hope so. Compensatory में government के पास option नहीं है. Government has to do it because private players are not doing it. Investments in the market, and to bring the economy back on track, it's required for compensatory spending by the government, and this we have seen in the case of COVID. Okay, and pump priming we have seen during the recent budget quoted by Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister of India. You can see in any of the newspapers, you will see pump priming. She has written, not written, she has quoted. Okay. So taxes हमने कर लिया, fiscal measures, money demand आपको समझ में आ गया. This is clear to you people. Reverse will be true in the case of this one. So what we have shared in the case of contractionary, to refrain the economy during inflation or anticipation of expansion of business cycle, when you are on the right side. So let's say that this is the economy performing. Where should I make the graph? Okay, so this is aggregate supply. This is aggregate demand. And this is aggregate demand 1. Okay, this is aggregate demand. And this is national income, output, and employment in the country. Okay. This is the level of equilibrium where the economy should perform. And this is where the economy is performing. Okay, here it should perform, and here it is performing. That means this is the inflationary gap. And in this case, this aggregate demand, which is at AD dash, has to be brought to AD. That is contractionary. How government will do? Government will go for reducing government expenses, increase the tax rate, and go for reducing transfer receipts. If the tax rate increases, government expenditure decreases, disposable income decreases. Disposable income decreases means you are moving from AD to AD dash. Because of disposable income, consumption decreases. Tax rate increases means investments get hampered. Investment decreases and the economy moves back to the initial position here, which is full employment. To the right of it, it is inflationary gap. So this is what this is excess demand. We have done inflationary gap. This is inflationary gap. Okay, so in this case, there's increase in consumption, there's increase in investment expenditure, there's increase in government expenditure. This leads to inflationary pressure. All C is increasing, I is increasing, government expenditure is increasing. This leads to increase in the price level. And if the price level increases in the country, then government has to go for reduction in aggregate demand. We have seen aggregate demand should reduce. And how to? So decrease. So what government will do? Government will go for decreasing its expenses. Government will go for increasing the tax rate, corporate tax rate, personal tax rate, which will result in decrease in disposable income, which will decrease private investments. This will reduce investments and this will bring down. Now look at this contractionary. This is what economy is performing here. Should perform here. This is This price level in the economy is P3, and economy is performing here at AD2. Okay, but economy should perform at AD1, that is at P1. This is inflation in the economy, and this is because of the excess demand in the economy. Demand is higher. What government will do? Government will impose taxes. Government will go for reducing transfer receipts. Government will reduce its expenses overall. That will lead to what? Decrease in disposable income, decrease in investments, increase in the tax proceeds of the government, and this will lead to aggregate demand going down from AD2 to AD1. Once it goes down, economy moves from point A to point B, and this reduces inflation from P3 to P1. Contractionary fiscal policy to combat inflation. Okay? Yes, if they ask you to make it with respect to classical, or if the question is related to both the parameters, then otherwise Keynesian should be sufficing enough. So you can follow with respect to Keynesian only. Okay. So the same concept. इसमें क्या होगा? Government will go for reducing. उसमें हमने कहा था the government will go for spending. No, government has to fill the gap. इस case में I've left it blank. Once I'll share it with you, आप solve कीजिएगा इसको and just see the value. What is the value coming here? Okay. You will come to know कि expansionary और contractionary में क्या gap होता है in terms of government expenditure. Okay. So fiscal policy is taking care about short term for economic growth and for the long term for sustainability. Okay. So short term, what is the core objective for short term for fiscal policy? We have seen if aggregate demand is low, then government has to go for expansionary. If aggregate demand is high, then government goes for contractionary. So basic is to bring price stability. The price should not be, in the case of deflationary, price is too low. And if the price is too low, so many of you had asked about why should the price increase. So if the price is too low, corporate do not get incentivized to invest. So moderate price is good for them to go for investments in the market, that because price is a motivating factor for a producer, isn't it? So that is why moderate price is important. So price stability, neither too low is good, nor too high is good. And that is how fiscal policy takes care about bringing it stability in the economy. And it takes care about employment. Aapne dekha, if output is increasing, employment is increasing, isn't it? So on the x-axis, what you saw taking care about output, employment and income. And on the y-axis, we have taken care about price component. So price stability, it brings price stability and it brings employment back on track. Okay. So long term, it takes care about, aggregate supply. Jo classical ne kaha short term ke liye, that is applicable in the long term. Because you imagine, can you increase, suppose let's say prices of tomato going up, tomato prices are going up. So what can government do in that case? Maximum government can do in that case, that government can go for, if India is exporting tomatoes, government will restrict export of tomatoes so that India should have sufficient amount of tomatoes, and that will lead to lowering down the price. So certain gap between the demand and supply can be met. But is it possible to increase production of tomato by innovative production technique in a short period of time? No, definitely. It is over the period of time. So aggregate supply is a long-term concept. And that is why we have shared fiscal policy, hamesha yaad rakhiye, it is a demand policy because it takes care about short term. But if successive fiscal policy over 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, 8 years is taking care about, that definitely leads to aggregate supply. Okay, so Government of India started working on from last 3 years on agriculture, 4 years. That is why gradually agriculture sector contribution, I believe, over the years will increase in GDP of the country. It cannot happen in 1 year. GDP, आपने budget में decide कर दिया this much to be given to agriculture sector, or all of a sudden agriculture productivity बढ़ गई. How is it possible? It's not possible, no? So it happens over the period of time. So that is a supply front, aggregate supply front, which leads to development. Short term is growth. So you see fiscal policy is taking care about GDP, economic growth, employment, price stability. But if you talk about long term, it takes care about economic development. Okay, that is by increasing aggregate supply. So long term can be infrastructure. We have shared 5 years, 7 years लगते हैं flyover, bridges and other 3 years to come se kam. And you have seen how much time we have taken for GST. So well-designed tax policy to bring well-designed tax policy. It took time first to think about, should we go for GST? Then government did so many experiments, you see, to bring it to that refinement, what you see today. And what's the impact today? Government is saying with immense pride that we are getting tax proceeds through GST continuously on the higher side. So designing a tax policy is also long-term process. उसी तरह से आप देखिए कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स में इंडिया में कितना रिफॉर्म आया ओवर द इयर्स. That's also part of ecosystem of startup, what you see today, government of India working on. Through budget only, they have to allocate certain funds for R&D to startups. So they have done it over the years. And this is helping India to perform better. Digital connectivity के लिए government ने कितना किया है, that is all about setting that entire ecosystem. That these are long-term things, okay? So government may do it on a short-term basis, but to implement it, but to get the result, but to get the trickle-down benefits through that for the sustainability is definitely long-term, okay? Metro construction, yes, आपने देखा दिल्ली में कितना कुछ change हो गया है metro की वजह से. Jobs, connectivity, real estate के prices. Nobody wanted to stay in Dwarka, but now people are happy. Noida, people are happy because they can travel very well. So things have become so easy. So definitely it has brought immense change in the lifestyle of people, quality of people, disposable income of the people, employment generation, everything. Government ke expenses hai which are paying, isn't it? So fiscal policy objective is to bring reduction in inequality, unequal distribution of income. We have already shared. Though we all have this major concern regarding middle income group, that too service class people get penalized because of this. But you can't help it. See, you can't help it. In a country like India, you have to pay tax to compensate for other people, those who are deprived of it. So one should do it happily. What else to do about it? Okay, so future earnings of the country is a function of what? How much you will generate in future depends on what? आपकी fiscal policy कितनी well defined है, isn't it? How well you are taking care about equity in the country, how well you are taking care about social, equal opportunities are given to all. There is regional balance in terms of preference, resources available to them, opportunities available to them. So equity, whether it is gender, whether it is about region, whether it is income, any form of equity, which is whether it is about sectoral, anything. So this about giving, it can be achieved through, जैसे PLI scheme अगर आपको पता हो, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का प्रोडक्शन लिंक्ड इंसेंटिव स्कीम गवर्नमेंट ने शुरू किया है. So this is performance linked incentive scheme. So there are 13 sectors where they have included. These sectors will be getting benefit over the period of time. They will be incentivized for their sales. ये सब tax policy government के budget में आता है. They decide over the, so once they had blue budget, then they had green budget. So this is how they take care about environment, they take care about agriculture. So budget is about, fiscal policy is about, it defines country's growth, it defines equity in the country, it defines well-being of the people, it defines social justice in the country, it defines price level in the country, it defines long-term sustainability of the country through, it defines how much debt you have on your head. So these are the components. We have shared progressive taxes, automatic stabilizer, differential indirect taxes. You know about differential, just say आपके demerit goods जो GST में define किए, they are in the uppermost tax bracket, isn't it? When you go for branded products, you have to pay high tax. When you go for necessity, basic necessity, then you pay minimum tax or zero tax. So this is how government is working. So basic amenities के लिए taxes बहुत कम होंगे और जो luxurious lifestyle के लिए होंगे उसके लिए taxes आपके बढ़ते जाएंगे respectively. So differential indirect tax government goes for following to encourage certain products, to discourage certain products, to accommodate certain players, set of people, those who cannot afford to go for it. So this is how they go for poverty alleviation programs, different programs government has introduced. They allot budget for that in this fiscal policy measures. So they allot definite budget. जैसे आप देखिए हेल्थ केयर पे they have allotted, they are taking care about education के लिए, marginal set of people housing के लिए, then for insurance also set of people those who do not have insurance, so they are taking care of insurance by bare minimum premium. 1 rupee premium is nothing like that. It's almost negligible. They are offering it to people, a marginalized set of people. Okay, so PLI आपसे share किया, performance linked incentive scheme. Gati Shakti government का project है where they are working on infrastructure. So Ayush is one of the project of government where they are promoting Ayurveda products. Special economic zones are there. Technology parks हैं India में इतने सारे, there where they are taking care about promoting technology. So government goes for fixing amount, Jan Dhan Yojana, pension fund, then production of subsidized commodities to MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises. How many benefits they have given to them. Subsidies for production, large scale production. Then Skill India, Startup India, Green India, Swachh Bharat. So all these are funds which have been allocated for that, and that is helping over the period of time. So taxes are bad, but to some extent it is necessary. And otherwise, if it extends beyond a point, that hampers growth. So that's the trade-off government has to decide about, that which limit we should go for fixing tax and go for compromising on growth. Okay, and where should we go for spending and where should we go for imposing tax? So this is what is all about fiscal policy. But what are the constraints, limitations of fiscal policy? I'm sorry. So fiscal policy basically, best example आप GST का लीजिए. Government realized that we should have a tax system which should be same across the country, isn't it? To have the uniformity in the tax system, they realized. So that was recognition. But उस recognition को realize करने में कितना time लग गया? And then to frame the structure. Isn't it? So that was one thing. Then decision lag. Decision lag is about how should we go for implementing it. So they decided about that how many slabs should we have, what commodity should be included in which slab, which commodity should be included in which slab. Kitni baar they did revision for this. If you can recap, people were totally confused. That where exactly is it? Then the government had to sensitize people regarding this. So decision regarding, first is about we need it. That took huge time. Then to go for it, how should we go for it? Structuring it. Okay, fine, we have to have GST in India, but how should we go for it? Structuring it. Decision lag. It takes time. There's a time gap between you decide. It takes a whole lot of time because you have to do evaluation. It's a huge country. Then implementation. Will it be passed or not? Whole lot of parties are going to support it or not. If there is resistance, then implementation will be on hold. That's implementation lag. Then once you have implemented, then there can be challenges on operational front. Some people may not be aware about how to execute it. Then other problem can be that those who have registered, they are not getting their input tax credit benefits. So such kind of challenges impact lag. So right from thinking about to find out the gap area, where should we work on, to take a decision, to implement, to take care about implementation, and then to see the impact. So these are challenges which are there when you go for some fiscal policy measures, and that leads to problem in terms of implementation. Okay. Marginal tax and progressive tax, here आप पहले classes में नहीं थे. Marginal tax is the tax which is associated with respect to income. Income एक तो आपने fix कर दिया lump sum tax, and the marginal taxes which changes with the level of income of yours. So progressive taxes, you're falling in that slab, but आपकी इनकम कितनी है उसके अकॉर्डिंगली आपको कितना इनकम टैक्स देना पड़ेगा. So that's about the marginal tax. So we have shared this in the tax equation when we discuss about tax multiplier. Hiril, just go through prior chapters. So basically lag conditions आपको समझ में आ गई है. So what happens, sometimes it happens policy initiative is taken, but sometimes it happens that economic condition is not supporting for that to go for it. So हो सकता है government ने during before COVID onset, they might have thought about so many things. We were so optimistic about India's GDP will increase, but what we saw, and they didn't plan for health expenditure in their budgets prior. But when COVID arrived, people started suffering. Then they had to divert their funds from other towards health. Isn't it? So this is how the change is there. So economic health decides about, you may think something and economic conditions changes. Just अभी आप देखिए यूक्रेन का crisis, petrol prices हैं. So government has to work on that. उधर श्रीलंका को petrol देना है. So our challenges are different. Then political parties are putting further pressure on. Then people are asking about how long we have to go for this hike in the price level of petrol and others, because the cost is escalated because of that. So these issues are there, these challenges are there, operational front. Okay, then taxation policy challenges are there. That, okay, fine, you have gone for tax reforms, but how many people are exactly aware about it? So they have to make them people aware, not only income tax officers, but set of people, those who want to avail tax. So government has simplified the tax norms, सरल form है अब. You need not go to a chartered accountant, you can fill it yourself today. So taxation has become, filing of tax has become easy over the period of time. Portal is so menu driven, you can easily do it. Okay. Then sometimes it becomes that government, if there is threat to the country from neighboring players, then in that case, you have to spend on defense. All of a sudden, you have to go for spending on defense, which you cannot avoid. And if you are spending on defense, you may not be having enough money as a government to spend on important activities, other important activities, but you can't help it. So classic case is Ukraine. So they have to spend major component of their income on country's income on defense, because that's the most important to safeguard country over and above anything. So these kind of challenges can be there. And then you go for making a plan, and there's a long period to implement it. That creates problem in terms of with your short-term plans. So short-term, you may thought about something, but long-term plan, you have got stuck. So short-term is also will not be able to execute properly, isn't it? So these are the challenges which are there. So that's it. This is the budget. You can see budget, government ka budget. Ye dekhiye aap. You can see revenue receipts of the government, tax receipts of the government, non-tax receipts of the government, non-debt capital, where the government has raised through, not through debt, but through other means, recovery of loans. So government might have given some loans, they have recovered it back. So total receipts are gayi yahan pe. Then you have expenditure components. So revenue expenditure, interest payments, capital expenditure, loans disbursed, fiscal deficit aa gaya, gap between the expenditure and receipts, fiscal deficit. Revenue deficit is between revenue expenses and revenue receipts. Fiscal में capital भी आ जाएगा, revenue भी आ जाएगा. But in revenue deficit, you are only talking about revenue expenses and revenue receipts. That is revenue deficit. And this primary deficit talks about interest payments, how much interest payments you have to do. So देखिए आप figure of interest payment, it has gone up to 440.3%. That's alarming. So country has debt, and for which they have to pay interest. And if you have to pay interest, then in that case, that is revenue expenditure, isn't it? Interest payments are revenue expenditure. So you're not generating anything, but it's not creating multiplier impact. But still it is going from your country. So it happens when you're in debt. जब आपका debt बढ़ता जाएगा, आपके interest payments बढ़ते जाएंगे, your revenue expenses will increase. Revenue expenses increases means your capital expenditure will decrease. Capital expenditure decreases means you'll further go for taking loan, and you're caught in a trap. That's why debt is very